Thank you all so much for being here today. I really appreciate it, and thank you to the festival for bringing me back. I did a workshop here about, I guess it was like 6 or 7 years ago, and I'm really grateful to come back again and talk about something different this time. So today we're going to be talking about conducting research for your next creative project, but before we get started, I kind of want to get a sense of who you guys are. So can you go ahead and raise your hand for me if you are currently a student? Now, can you keep your hand raised if you are a student and you would consider your major or your future major to be something in the arts? Okay, good mix. Hands down, please. Now, can you raise your hand if you are not a student? And would you keep your hand raised if you were currently employed in the arts? Nice. So it looks like we kind of have a really good mix of everybody. We have students who are in the arts, we have people who are employed in the arts, and we have a mix of people who aren't, which is kind of what I was hoping for. So, last question for all of you now. Can you go ahead and raise your hand for me if you have an idea for a creative project that you would like to pursue? It could be, I don't know, writing a novel. It could be working on a feature film, maybe writing a hit TV show. Go ahead and raise your hand. Yeah, I feel like almost everybody has some idea for a project that they want to put out there in the world, something that they think would either benefit them to make it or would benefit other people to see it, something they think would be fun to work on. Who knows what your reason is? Everyone has a creative project that they would like to pursue. So the thing is, there are a lot of different ways to get started with your creative project. And one of them is research. It's something I think often gets overlooked in the process of starting up a project. Sometimes I think you can kind of just skip past the research stage and kind of go right into, I want to make something. And I think that's something that we can all benefit from, is kind of taking a step back, slowing down, and really getting into the research stage of things. So when I say research, I think a lot of us immediately jump to the thought, like, your professor is asking you to write a paper and is asking for bibliography with like a ton of sources. But that's not exactly what I'm talking about today. Basically what I'm going to be talking about is breaking down the category of research into two kind of separate subcategories. We're going to be talking about fact-based research, which is kind of what you think of. Sorry, I tend to talk too fast when I start doing presentations. Like, what's that? Sorry. I was also telling them I haven't really talked in front of a crowd in like a few years. I'm not a great public speaker, so bear with me. So, breaking it back down again. Fact-based research. Now I can't even talk. Which is kind of what you think of when you think of that paper that you're going to be writing for your professor. It's going to be a mix of like scientific research or maybe historical research. It could be even like on the business side of things. And then we're also going to be talking about visual research, which is kind of something that I think gets skipped past a bit when you're talking about research. It's not what most people tend to think of. So today we're going to be talking about both of those. But before we kind of get into the details of them and kind of talk about how you can apply both types of research to your creative projects, I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of my past, my work history, and give you a sense of the projects that I've worked on so you can kind of see where I've applied both types of research to my work in the past. So I started at William & Mary in 2007. I was a film major. At the time it was under the Literary and Cultural Studies header, and I minored in art and art history. While I was here, I was a member of AMP. I was a intern at this festival, which is why it's always fun to come back. And I worked on a lot of different creative projects while I was here, whether it was like in film or theater or the art classes that I took for my majors and minors. And on those creative projects, I had a lot of different responsibilities, but something that kind of never really occurred to me until I had two separate professors pointed out to me was the fact that I tended to do a lot of research for any project that I was working on. Almost to the extent that sometimes I would spend more time on the research than the actual project itself, which didn't always work out great for me, and still doesn't work out great for me. This presentation is kind of a sign of that. I might have spent a little too much time saving images for this presentation and kind of only put it together at the end. Sorry, I tend to do that. But yeah, here's an example of a project that I did for, it was one of the theater classes. It was, I think, entertainment design. And I had never done costume design before. I really had no experience doing anything with costumes. I did set design in high school. But the professor, we were doing a streetcar named Desire. And is it raining? And I pulled a lot of reference images for the characters, and that's kind of where I got the ideas for some of the designs that I did. One of the other professors who pointed the same thing out to me was an architecture professor. And this is a little chaotic, this is overwhelming, these are crazy collages for a project I had done, but this professor also pointed out the same thing. I tended to do a lot of research, I tended to save a lot of reference images, and then kind of put the project in motion at the end. So from there, once I graduated, I knew that I wanted to work in film. And I moved back home to South Florida, and there really isn't a huge film industry in South Florida, but what is there is a lot of docuseries projects. So I ended up on a show called Swamp Forest for Animal Planet. I was initially hired as a story intern, and then they brought me on full-time as a story assistant. So what that meant for my job essentially was, it was a kind of combination of story-based research and that fact-based research that I was talking about before. So essentially, on the project itself, we would do recreations of stories that had happened in the past, and that was my job. My job was to do all the research for those stories, to compile them, to keep like a massive, I don't even know how many stories there eventually were in that document, but probably hundreds of just stories I had found online, in newspaper articles, and archives online. And then I would sort through, pick out the best ones, and then the producers would be like, okay, that's something we would consider covering. The other thing that I was in charge of was all the facts that we showed on the screen. Sorry, talking again. I need to talk more. The other part was what was called our facts log, and that's actually this one down here. So it's just a little sample of it, but basically anytime we presented a fact on the screen and said that this is something truthful, we had to present sources that said, yes, it's not just us making it up, it's not just coming from the people on the show, this is something that is scientifically proven by legitimate sources. You can't just go to, like, I guess, my uncle and ask what a rattlesnake might feel like people. So from there, I ended up working with the same production company on a couple shows, something for Travel Channel, TNT. Those were more field-based projects. So I kind of ended up leaving the research realm for a little while, and I missed that. So I decided to take a step back from docuseries projects and went backpacking, and eventually found a graduate program in the Czech Republic where I did a master's thesis project on research for creative projects. So this was just a small sample of pieces that I'd kind of put together just so you could kind of get a sense of it. Yes, Caitlin, I know this is where you went to school, which is really weird because I was there like 10 years ago. But basically, my project was taking a novel and approaching it as if it was going to be adapted into a feature film. So I pulled a lot of research for any locations that were going to potentially be used. Obviously, this was all just theoretical, but I did some location scouts. I went to archives. I took a lot of photos of the area, and eventually made a couple just a couple models that we wanted, right? And graphic design concepts, things like that. Primarily, it was mostly research-based, but I did a little bit of practical work too. And then when I finished my master's thesis, I kind of knew that this was going to be my last chance to apply for an internship. You should definitely take advantage of that if you are a student. And I decided to apply for what was my dream job at the time, which was multi-disciplinary Imagineering, kind of a dream job I had as a kid. And I initially actually started out in the parks. I went and did the college program for a few months. And while I was there, applied for a professional internship, which was basically with the cruise line project, and ended up staying with them for about 3.5, 4 years once I was hired on full time. For that project, I had a ton of different roles, and my role eventually, it evolved over the course of the project. But when I first started out, a lot of what I was doing was very research heavy. We were right at the beginning of the project, so it was like the brainstorming stage, and basically I worked with our creative director and our creative producer, and they were coming up with ideas that they wanted to pitch to like senior leadership of the project, senior leadership for the company. And they would come to me and say, hey, I have an idea for a restaurant or a space, or this is what I want a lounge to be. Can you pull reference images for that space and put together a pitch deck essentially for each of those spaces? And a lot of what I did is unfortunately like not confidential, I can't show it because a lot of things weren't used. And a lot of things were. That's one of the nice things about the brainstorming questions, is they kind of just throw a lot of ideas out and roll with it. But this is a space that eventually did end up becoming a reality on the ships. It is, you can kind of see the bigger pictures on there. It's a restaurant called 1923, and it's themed to all the creators and the animators of the Walt Disney Animation Studio. The space featured a lot of different concept art, maquettes, basically anything you would think of when you're thinking of animation or animation art. And you can see at the top, that was a page from one of the research decks that I did, kind of just showing off. Here's some of the things we could show in the restaurant. Ink and paint was basically the people who worked at the studio and did all the actual inking for the drawings. So one of the things I was saying was, oh, we could show like bottles of paint. We could show scales, things like that. These are all like props that could be used in the space. So the full deck basically broke down like each of the different spaces, broke down different ideas for different characters that we could feature in there, kind of showing the layout of the space. But this is just one page from it. And I think it's okay to show that, but if anyone's related to Bob Iger. So let's see what else. While I was there, I also participated in an event called Pitch Fest, and this is something unfortunately I can't show you at all because it was never made and the company still owns the project. But basically it was an internal company challenge for Imagineers to basically pitch an idea for a concept or an attraction that they could potentially use one day in the parks. And so I worked with, people live up there, right? Is that the, okay. So Pitch Fest, basically you had to pitch a concept or an attraction. So I worked with a partner, we put together a 5-minute pitch and like essentially the research deck like that. Our project was based on something that exists in the park and has a historical bent, but that's about all I can say to you about it. But we did a lot of research for it and kind of tied in our idea to the actual concept. That was probably the last time I spoke in front of a big crowd, but it was live streamed to everybody at Imagineering. It was terrifying, and we were actually voted as like audience favorite, which was super cool. And I'm really hopeful that someday it will become an actual thing, but until then, I can't tell you what it is. So I was at Disney until COVID. Unfortunately, I was part of their mass layoffs. But from there, I decided to pivot back to like the film and TV world. And I ended up after doing a couple smaller things, I ended up making connections with someone who was an art department coordinator, and she brought me on to Manhunt, which was an Apple TV miniseries. That came out, I think about a year and a half ago or so, and it was really interesting to work on. For that project, I did a lot of historical and visual research. Here's kind of 2 examples of things that I had done. So on the right side, you can see a still from the show, and that's, for anyone who doesn't know, sorry, it's about the hunt for John Wilkes Booth after the Lincoln assassination. And so that is Booth and Harold, his co-conspirator, in the boat there, and they had come to me and said, hey, what would a rowboat look like that they'd use? And I actually found a couple images, that one on the top and then on the bottom too, which were they were engravings from like magazines or illustrated newspapers at the time. And it actually turned out pretty cool. The boat was not built by our team who found it, but like it even has the little notch here. Oh, sorry, I should touch that. This little piece was cut out, which you can't see, but it's pretty cool when you find something that actually like looks how it did, or as close as we know to how it did. This illustration, I think, was from a few months after the assassinations, if who knows what changed in those few months, but how people knew what was going on. And the other thing that I like to point out is something so minuscule that nobody watching the show will ever notice this. And in fact, nobody probably knows of this except for you all now. But one of the things I helped out on the project with was a lot of graphic design research. So our graphic designer would come to me and say, this is something I'm working on, can you provide reference material for it? Or what are some names that would be appropriate for this space? But she came to me and said she was doing a facade of a building called the Lafarge House Hotel. House and hotel were used interchangeably. And they were going to print with their drawings basically that afternoon, but she said, there's a space on the drawing for a number for the street address. We can put any number in the world in there, whatever you think. But she said, she came to me and said, do you actually think you can find out where it was? And it turns out the building burned down in like the late 1860s, 1870s, something like that. So there isn't a ton of information. And if I was approaching this as a researcher would, with a ton of time, and if I was in the city, I would probably go to like local archives, like building company, or like surveyors, people like that, and approach them and ask for any sort of historical documentation they had, but we had like less than an hour. So started searching, and there's a lot of images online of the side of the building, or like faraway views, but doesn't show anything about the address. And then eventually we came upon like, okay, it's next to a theater, here's what the theater's address was, we can kind of make an approximation of what it could have been. And so I went to her and said, here's the number, it's possibly like somewhere in the 670s, go with that. And then right before she was about to send it, I had an idea, and I thought, well, wait a minute, who would be looking for addresses in New York? And it would be travelers. And I happened to find this on the Columbia University archives. It was a page from, what was it? It was an almanac, a traveler's almanac. And you can actually see up there that it's listed and it's the address, and so it is a tiny little detail that nobody watching the show will ever care about or know. So many other things changed in the show that are historically accurate. But that is, and I can point to it and say, that is there because of me. So that's kind of a general overview of some of the jobs that I've had. I've had other ones in between, but these were the ones that kind of had the heaviest research bent. Like heaviest in the sense of like, they were either very visually oriented research or historical or scientific, like that first show for Animal Planet was very science oriented because, well, I forgot to say, but anytime we talked about animals on the show, I did research for that too. I'm not a biologist. But so those were kind of a general sense of some of the projects I worked on, so you can kind of see what those different types of research are. So that's all kind of my history, but I also want to show you what is out there in the industry itself. So I'm going to show you a sheet of images. We're going to play a little game. Basically, these images are out there in the internet, and they were used by production team members on different TV shows to either demonstrate what the set might look like or what costumes might look like, or basically any sort of production design type element. And based on these images, I want you to take a guess and say what you think the show might be. I have 3 examples. So the first one's going to be one show, then I'll show you what it is. The second one will be a different show. All these are within the past few years, and go ahead and raise your hand because I have snacks. So, first one is going to be this one. Any thoughts? In the back. Bridgerton? You are correct. Yes! Do you want Sour Patch or Reese's?
Oh, Sour Patch.
I've got watermelon and regular ones.
Oh, not watermelon.
Okay, you got it. You got it already, but I also want to hear why you think it's Bridgerton.
Oh, because I saw a clip of Bridgerton that looks just like it.
So what in this image stands out to you and says, this is Bridgerton?
Those dresses.
Yeah, they're Regency dresses, that's correct. In fact, if you look at the still down here, she's essentially wearing the exact same dress that they used in the reference image. I'm just going to go back and forth a little bit. You can see in the top there, the wall covering is very, very similar to the one in that room right down there. There's a lot that they took from there. You can see all the wall detail. There's even a shot, sorry to be flipping back and forth. There's even a scene when I was looking through all the screen caps of like the 2 sisters, like one's playing the piano, one's sitting on the couch nearby. It's pretty cool that you can see this direct reference that they're grabbing from either archives or like the top is from a palace in Sweden, and that's going right into the show. And this was all, these were all images from the set decorator. So she's the person essentially in charge of, she's like an interior designer, the one furnishing all the spaces and making them look as they do. So yeah, that's correct, Bridgerton. All right, next one. Any thoughts? It's a little trickier.
Wait,
I saw you in the pre.
Well, I don't know. Is it Past Lives?
No,
Is it Squid Games?
it is Squid Game. So what about this makes you think it's Squid Game?
I played a Roblox game one time with a track that was in reference to Squid Games. That's about all I can say.
Okay, well, they worked for you. What do you think?
Oh, let's go. Here is Squid Games. Thank you.
This one's actually pretty interesting. This is a mix of images that were taken from season 1 and season 2. The production designer has gone on record talking about some of the inspiration that she had for the show. And it's pretty neat that there's quite a mix up here. We've got some like classic art. We've got an Escher painting all the way on the right, which I'm sorry, I'm going to keep flipping back and forth. I should have thought about that before. But you can see like here, directly referenced. If we're looking at the Magritte painting in the center, yeah, they don't have houses like that in the show, but they basically took a painting and had something in the show where it's like a very dark event happening like on ground level with like this perfectly blue sky with the pretty clouds above. All the way on the left, that's an illustration from, I think it was either a children's book or a magazine, but the illustrator just, she mostly illustrates for children, which is kind of strange when you think about that it was used for something like Squid Game, which is so violent. We've got a photographer from South Korea from like the 70s and 80s, and you can see that they used her work for like the space here. If you've seen the show, it's like the episode where all the spaces, they're all like in a little mini town sort of thing. And then we've got like 2 images there on the bottom from the second season, the carousel. That's just a stock image I found online. You can buy it. Not that impressive, but it's exactly what they used for inspiration for that game in the show. And then the last one is basically just like the design with the curves they use. It's apparently featured in a lot of schools, but you can see it right here quite a bit. So that was Squid Game. And last one. Thoughts? Oh, I have some. There's a lot of hands.
I know.
Who was? I don't know. I looked down at the moment you all raised your hand. Now I feel bad. We can all take a watermelon each. All right, I guess go ahead and shout it out.
Severance.
Yeah. So I don't know what to do with this for the world. Yeah, this is Severance, and these are all images that were taken by someone whose job title is researcher. She is their visual researcher. Her name's Lauren Sandoval. She's also worked on Oppenheimer, and she has the job that I'm trying to eventually work my way towards. She works directly with the production designer and pulls reference images for them, puts together decks or presentations, kind of showing off, here's what we can do for these spaces. And yeah, you can see, it's almost crazy when you look at these images, and I'll show you the stills on the next page, but things you'll notice in particular, take a look at this, the lighting in the ceiling. Obviously the long, creepy white corridors. This image here, you're gonna see they have an office where it's basically that painting in the background just split into different panels. Obviously the retro technology and the cubicles. Now what's interesting with this one is the colors don't exactly match the show. The show has its own unique color style. That doesn't really matter because we're still getting the sense of what this space could look like. So take a look, and there it is. Yeah, and you can see like exactly the same ceiling panels. Pretty crazy, yeah.
Oh, so like, how do you go about citing these things? Like, if they show in Squid Game, like the picture of that, what's that? Or like they copy that carousel thing. Like, you can't just put a site while like people are watching the show because that's weird. Like, how do they cite their images?
Well, what do you mean exactly by citing?
Like, do they have to cite like a bibliography if you use like people's images?
I see. No, this is really just inspiration essentially. So they're not in any way taking those images and putting them in the show itself. If they were, then yeah, they would probably pay a licensing fee. Like if they were using a piece of like a graphic and it had a picture of that carousel on it, then yeah, they'd pay to use that. But if they're just using it for inspiration, this is usually stuff that's just internal. Obviously, these all end up online eventually. Not a ton of them, but some do. Like I found hers on her portfolio website, the information from Squid Game that was from an interview that the production designer had done. But yeah, no, if it's not being used directly on screen, if it's just inspiration, you can use it to your heart's content.
Okay.
All right, and so I have one more that I'm going to show you all. And at this point, I feel like you all are basically experts at identifying visual imagery for projects. So I've started working on essentially what's going to be a new modern thriller, basically in the vein of the Bourne Legacy projects. So I would like some of your feedback when you see this. What do you think? What's going on with this set of images? Is there anything that stands out to you as glaringly incorrect? Or is it all incorrect? Yeah.
The top left is the knight on the horse,
Mm-hmm.
which is, I know it's spy thriller. That one, I wonder, it makes me question the era.
Yeah, correct, yeah, definitely. Do you want a snack?
Sure, the Sour Patch.
Can I toss it?
Yeah.
Maybe not hit Sam.
Yeah,
That
go
works
for
in.
it.
Yes! Okay. Yeah, obviously, when you're picking reference images for something, you want to make sure that it matches the time period that you're working in. That would make absolutely no sense for a modern day spy thriller. Any other thoughts? Caitlin?
Well, you've got like this animated still down here in the lower
Yeah.
corner, so it makes you wonder about your, like, the style of project you're working for. Not that you can't take inspiration from all kinds of things,
Sure.
but, so I'd be curious to hear, I guess, how
Nope.
much you have to stick in, like, the genre of,
Yeah. I mean, you don't, but something like this is glaringly off. It's only there because I searched for the word spy and it's a picture from Ratatouille and he's spying on someone. Obviously, that does not make any sense for a spy thriller. Like, tonally, it's incorrect. When you're putting together a board, you want to make sure that the tone of the images matches the tone of the project you're going to do. So, if you're doing a project about rabbits, you could end up with something like Zootopia or Watership Down, both two very different things, but you want to make sure that the images that you're picking match the tone of what you're going to do. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that it was, in the sort of Bourne genre,
Mhm.
and then two of these images, have Matt Damon. So I wonder, is that a faux pas, like does it anchor it too much in a particular character or actor to reference them?
It could or could not. It really depends on what you're interested in doing. Like, I think something like that wouldn't necessarily be considered a faux pas, especially if, say, you were going to be really looking towards doing a project with that actor. A lot of times, pictures are just used as stand-ins. I have done pitch decks where I've used actors that will never be related to that project. They're just used because they have long dark hair or something like that. But yeah, no, I mean, you could consider it either way, essentially. Any other thoughts? Caitlin, you can get a snack if you want.
we'll see how what's the, like, standard on watermarks?
Yeah,
Sure.
a great question. They're kind of distracting, aren't they? That is something that you would shy away from if this was going to be something that was shown in front of anybody in a professional setting. Especially one that's as glaring as that. Like, sometimes there might be a little watermark in a corner. That's not the end of the world. But something where all you see is Alamy or A's everywhere, yeah, you would not want to use an image like that. Or if you were going to and that's the only source for it, you could pay for it. Not the end of the world if you're approaching like a multi-million-dollar project. Any other thoughts? Basically, I think there's a problem with every single image. Yeah.
I think the bottom center is also kind of interesting. Initially, I was thinking it was like a volume thing, and then I was like, oh, maybe that's actually a safe. I was trying to figure out most of like the glowing lights. It just seems like it affects the tone.
You can't tell what it is.
Yeah.
So it's a completely useless image. You want to pick images that support the story you're telling and want to be very clear what they are. Do you have a preference?
Sure, I'll do Star Touch.
I'm sorry, you can spoke up a word, what are we do?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, definitely. That's also, it looks a little like future techy for something like Bourne that's kind of more in the gritty sense of things. Any other thoughts on the middle image on the top or the bottom right? Bottom right might be, like, you can kind of see what's wrong with it. Maybe not from that angle. It's super pixelated, like you can't see it all. I mean, you can tell it's him, but beyond that, it's like, why would you pick an image that you can barely tell what's going on in it? So yeah, you want to look for high quality images for your pitch decks. And then, or research decks. And then this top one, again, It's somebody's shoulder. It came up when I Google searched porn films. Like that was an actual result. I don't know why, but yeah, you don't always want to rely on the first thing that Google shows you. It wasn't the first thing that Google showed me, but it was within a reasonable amount of scrolling distance. So yeah, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but these are some of the things that I think are pretty important when you are considering reference images. We've talked about most of them. You want to make sure the subject matter is very clear, the image is clear. You want to make sure it matches your project tone and the intended audience. You want to make sure that it helps tell the story. Color choice could be important, could not be. Like we saw with Severance, they ended up using very different colors, but the choice of the colors that you choose for your images also helps tell the story. So if you're kind of telling a story that's more like on the sadder end of things, maybe you don't want to use like hot pink colors unless it's a stylistic choice, and then kind of you have to justify it. Other things, no big watermarks, high quality images like we said, and then for these two, I'd say like you want to use a variety of different images. So maybe you have like a detail shot next to a landscape shot, things like that. But you also want to make sure that it's all cohesive and it tells like a visual story altogether. Other things I guess you can consider, like with color choice, lighting makes a big difference. Cool versus warm. Traditional like storytelling type devices for most of these. Let's see, what else did I make a note of? I think that's most of what I was talking about. Cool. Here I just have a quick slide with different resources that you can use to find. Sorry, I'm very dry throat now. Or shaking out dry. Just some sources online and around that you should consult when you are looking for research and reference images. I have been very film and media oriented, so a lot of the ones that I use are on the left. I mean, these are a little more like straightforward, obvious. If you're working on a scientific project, then I'd say make sure you're consulting the experts on that particular subject matter. Same with history. You don't want to just go to the first article that talks about this historical subject. You want to make sure you're getting your information from the source. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought not canoe is not the right word.
The little boat, yeah.
The little boat was neat for the John Wilkes Booth. And I remember I heard something about the Gladiator movies when they made those was they in actual times they would have ads in the middle of the Gladiator shows to advertise like companies.
Yeah.
But for the new Gladiator movies, they were like, they don't want to add that because it would look fake.
Yeah.
Even though that actually, how often is it that you'll run into a situation like that where you gotta?
I think it probably happens a lot more than we realize, or even consider. There's so many choices that go into making film projects, as a lot of people in this room know. And a lot of them are made for all sorts of different reasons. Maybe it could be a budgetary reason. Maybe it's just for this is something you need your audience to consider. It could be scheduling related. Maybe we only have access to this location for a certain time, so we can't film here. Oh well, we have to use the second best location that doesn't look as good. But yeah, no, I think there's plenty of chances where they'll say, this is something that a modern audience wouldn't get, and we can't put it in there because they're gonna be like, what's going on? I hadn't heard that, but that's a fun fact. Other things I think are useful, art books. I've been collecting art books since like middle school, and I have a pretty decent collection. I'd say it's something, if you're interested in doing, you should start going to garage sales, going to estate sales and looking for them. You can find really great ones at library bookstores. Yeah.
You mean like how-to drawing books sort of, or?
Kind of a mix. If you're interested in like learning how to draw, yeah, that could be useful. But I'm more talking about like making this film or making like films from the studio. They put a lot of projects studios will put out into like books for every single film they do. Like Pixar, for example, has been doing it since I don't think they did initially one for Toy Story, but they later did one afterwards. But they have really great like making of books, and this is kind of the case, not just in film, but you'll also see it in like gaming. So a lot of video game makers will put out massive art books with concept art, a lot of reference images, And then we'll kind of go into detail with everything, and not just the set, but the like costumes, character design, whatever you might be interested in. So yeah, I love art books. I suggest you check them out. I'm sure the library has a ton. They had some when I was a student here, so I'm sure the collection's only grown. And yeah, like libraries, archives, they're the best. Use them. Of this list here, Shot Deck on the left is my favorite. It is paid, it's an annual subscription, but for me it's totally worth it. If I can escape here, can I do that? Do I have internet? I was going to show you all. Oh, I can't, but afterwards we can crowd around and I can show you what Shot Deck looks like. It's one of my favorites, and now I lost the keynote presentation. Oh no. What did I do? It's too ambitious. There it is. Okay. Alright. Oh, and this is just a little bit of information about what you could use or how you might want to display or share your research once you've had it. There's all sorts of different things that you might end up using it for. Something like a pitch deck. That up there is the initial pitch deck for Stranger Things. It's online. It kind of set the standard for the industry for a while. And I recommend checking it out. It does have a different name. Just search Montauk Stranger Things and you'll find it online. It's basically about a 10-page document. It's more like a, not necessarily just a pitch deck, but it's also like a series Bible kind of overview. And you can see like direct inspiration that they have in there that they use in the show. So yeah, you can display the reference images you use in something like a pitch deck. You might want to put your images together into some sort of mood board. That is from, what is that site? I don't use this one, but I think it's become pretty popular. Milanote. That's in the center there. You might just collect images in Pinterest. That's still very popular. On the right, I have what would have been a presentation board, more like a physical board. And so for something like that, you want to make sure that you use like nice paper and things are cut out cleanly. You just want to make sure you're presenting everything really well. And then for something more on the lines of like the scientific and fact-based work, you might want to do something more like just a spreadsheet type thing. And that's what I was doing on that first show for Storm Force. And then maybe the other thing is just keeping an archive of images for yourself. And I highly recommend doing that, just saving anything you like. You never know when you're going to want to use it again. I stole a bunch of images from a project I had used as like sheets of paper, like the little scrap papers for this. Like, you're going to use your stuff again. It's all stuff I've done in the past, and we'll keep doing it again. I bought the stock, might as well use it. And then some other good habits to develop when you are working in research or this industry. File management and organization is key. I can't tell you how many times people have come to me because they can't find something, and I look at their desktop and it's total chaos, and you will never find anything on it. So basically, you're going to approach every project a little differently. Some people might have things already established, but you should start doing that with your own work yourself. Start setting up like a folder structure that you want to consistently use. Maybe you will have like the top folder as the project name, and then like you'll do subcategories for like pre-production, post. Like you can break it down any way you want, but start being consistent in how you're doing it, and also be consistent in how you're naming your files. I know a lot of people don't use traditional like files anymore. It's all in the cloud, but I think a lot of people are going to continue to think of it like the old school way with the traditional files, and it's something that if you are good at being organized with that, it is really key for a lot of people in the industry, especially older people like me now. Yeah, what's up?
As an older person, I would say that your thing about using the 8-digit date is so important.
Yeah.
Because if you go in and touch a file, it could touch the timestamp of it, and so often you'll see people and they'll be like, oh, it was September 10th when I did that, and they might even put in 0910, but now it's 3 years later, and you know, the benefit of doing year, month, date is that when you do the files alphabetically, they are chronological.
Yeah. No, it's super helpful, and yeah, it's an extra step when sometimes you're just like saving an image from online and it's got like a mix of random letters and numbers, and you're never gonna think, why do I need this? But maybe a month from now you're gonna be looking for that, and you're gonna want to know like, oh, that's how you change depending potentially on the project, or like I said, some people might have their own methods established already, but that one works pretty well for me for a lot of things. And then when I say source there at the end, like I would use that when I was saving graphic design reference for our graphic design around Manhunt, and you would have to go back later on and be like, oh, where did this come from? Can we use this if it was something that we wanted to possibly purchase? So yeah, you might want to say this is where I found it, especially if you want to also find something else from that same source later on. What else do I have on here? Another quick here, back up your files. I learned this the hard way as a senior. I had a computer crash and lost a ton of work my senior year here. That's why I was actually happy I found those 2 random projects saved. But yeah, back things up. You should have backup drives of all your important projects and all the work that you have. And you might just want to back up all your archives of images once you start to build them, because you want to keep using them. Like I said on the page before when I was showing the presentation board, you want to be tidy. You want to make sure things look clean. Nobody wants to look at something that looks like it was just slapped together at the last second. And then organize things. Keep your images, like, you want to make sure you have some sort of order to them when you're putting things in there. I think studying layout design, as I said on the left, is super useful. I'm by no means a graphic designer, but I do read a lot about graphic design, and I think that's something that really helped me move forward with certain projects. Other things, Photoshop. If you don't use it, you should start learning how to use it. It's really essential. Same thing with Keynote and PowerPoint. PowerPoint I feel like is less used today. Keynote's a little more. Canva is also big nowadays. I've never used it, but I think it's pretty popular. And then editing, not just like editing photos, but editing your work to the sense of like knowing when you want to cut something out, and knowing when you need to add something more. So, last little slide here for the most part. So how do you apply what we've talked about today to some of your projects? So think about your project when I first, at the beginning of the session, asked you, do you have a creative project that you're interested in working on? Think about that project and maybe think about how some of these tools and tips I've talked about can be applied to that creative project. And then I have just like, for fun, in the style of Severance, a little worksheet. Basically, you do not have to do this. It's kind of just a way to organize your thoughts when you're thinking about when you do reference images. I guess you just pass it over. Yeah, I mean, you can really approach looking for images and research anything you want to, but something like this is just a quick way to start organizing your thoughts. And then my last slide here, just start your project. You can basically search for reference and research materials forever, as I want to do. But at some point you need to just actually start working on your project, and I'd say go for it. Go work on your creative ideas and put them out in the world if you want to. And that's about it for today. So if you have any questions, feel